Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us again today for another one of our video chats. As usual, we'll have Q&A open from the beginning, so if you've got questions, feel free to post in there, and we'll be watching them throughout the talk. Today, I am joined by Justin Grainer, our VP of Public Policy, once again, as well as Congressman Chuck Fleischmann. Welcome, both of you. Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
So, Congressman, I feel like we did this a couple of months ago at our offices, and it's kind of wild how the world's kind of changed. Give us, sort of your take on kind of how everything has gone and your work as a member of Congress as we've sort of worked through this pandemic.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone who is watching this. Yes, I remember a few months ago we were talking about unprecedented economic vibrancy, not only in our community here, but around the country. We were looking as to where we were going to be expanding. And then, sadly, I was in Omaha, Nebraska, actually at Stratcom, doing some national defense work, and had an opportunity in February to sit down with some infectious disease doctors who talked to me a little bit about the fact that they were actually treating some COVID-19 patients. These were patients who had actually come into that venue from cruise ships and were being treated there. And they sat with myself and a bipartisan delegation of House members from around the country and told us that this was going to be a serious pandemic and a crisis. And wow, they were right. From that time on, we have seen literally the world engulfed by this pandemic. It has affected hundreds of countries, some more than others. Obviously, it has had an impact on the United States of America, all 50 states, some more seriously than others. And the ensuing economic harm which followed the healthcare harm has been in some sectors catastrophic. And I really want to address both the health issue, the economic issue, and the legislative issue. And I'll try to do that in as concise and short a fashion as possible so that I can do what I think is most important to the Chattanooga Area Chamber of Commerce, who again I thank for this opportunity, but to make sure that our members in Hamilton County who are watching this and who have long been members of our great chamber, actually the best chamber in North America, can actually get the benefit of having me answer questions. On the COVID-19 front, on the healthcare front, there's no question that this pandemic continues. In many areas, it has begun to abate. We have seen cases go down in the hot spots, such as New York, Washington State, Illinois. We've seen a slight uptick in our area, but fortunately, by and large, the state of Tennessee has weathered the healthcare side of this, I think, in a way much more beneficial than others. I attribute and thank our local leaders, not only in Hamilton County, but in the respective municipalities, our governor, with whom I speak every week, and we're getting through that. But we're going to have to watch this. I am not a doctor. I'm not an infectious disease specialist. I'm a legislator. But having spoken with the top doctors in this field, the pandemic has been a real crisis. And we are doing better. We're doing better with testing. There's no question that from the inception, not only the United States, but the world was caught by surprise. We were getting some false positives and false negatives on testing. There was insufficient testing. We're doing a much better job. Why do I address this? Because these doctors tell us that we could see a re-emergence. Now, it's not gone away totally, but we could see a re-emergence of this pandemic in the fall or in the winter, concurrent running with the flu and other potential maladies that might come through. That will be a source of concern, not only here in East Tennessee and across our state, but in the country, and we're going to watch that. From the economic side, let's have a very straight up conversation about that. No question, this pandemic had a tremendous negative impact on many industries: restaurants, hospitality, healthcare, and myself as a federal legislator, and that's just to name a few, have basically worked with 4 bills, the last 2 being much more substantial in terms of getting funding out to states and municipalities, to affected industries. The PPP programs were so successful and popular that, if you recall, a few weeks ago, one of those programs actually ran out of money. We went in at the federal level and replenished that, and there are sufficient funds there now. So dollars are going out. In our great state of Tennessee, we saw about $10 billion in PPP and related monies go out to affected businesses. So it has worked well. Our banks, both our community banks and our larger banks, have done a good job to get these dollars out to the affected industries. I will say this, some industries were not helped as much as others, and I heard their cry. Healthcare, we're working to get more dollars into healthcare. For example, right here in Hamilton County, our dear friends at Erlanger did not have enough COVID cases to get some of the COVID relief. We worked with Dr. Turner and the Erlanger folks to make sure that they could get the dollars that were available. They're going to need more help. When you stop elective surgeries, unfortunately, they've started them again, but when you stop elective surgeries, you're going to be in a position where you're going to suffer. Hospitality, my goodness, folks at Vision Hospitality and 3H, who I rely on, have been devastated. We're talking about 8 or 10% vacancies. Restaurateurs, one of the good things now is, as we are opening up, and thank goodness we're opening up, this aid will help them more. Think about it. If you tell them they can't have customers and they've got to use this for their employees who are not there at 75% of that, it's aid that does not hit the spot. And many of the local restaurateurs reached out to me early and said, it's not hitting the spot. Now it is much more effective. Why? Their customers are back, their employees are back, and now that benefit, that federal benefit, will actually help them. What is my hope? My hope is that we got the state of Tennessee about $3 billion worth of aid. I stay on the line with our state legislators and our governors weekly. That will be used to address budget shortfalls. In addition to that, just Friday night, we were able to get the state of Tennessee a $6 million grant dealing with unemployment issues and the like. So in addition to these tranches of money that we've got going out and have been approved, we will be able to use appropriation dollars. I'm Tennessee's only member of our 9 members in Tennessee in the House on the Appropriations Committee. We are working on that. So there will be grants. There will be other dollars available. So my message to our membership is, any dollar I can get for our affected communities, for our state, for our municipalities, for our counties, for our businesses, I want to make sure that if they are out there, our great state and our citizens in Tennessee will be able to avail themselves of that. My staff has worked with countless businesses, entrepreneurs, workers, to make sure that the federal benefits that we have legislated for get into their hands. And with that, I'll open up for questions. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I think you're muted, Justin.
There we go.
Sorry, I knew I was going to do that at least once on one of these. So, obviously, one of the things that we've heard a lot about is liability reform. Obviously, yes, with businesses as they start to come back online, that is going to be a larger and larger concern, I think. What are you hearing in Washington about the possibility of getting some sort of temporary and targeted liability reform for businesses that are acting in good faith to do their best to keep their constituents safe?
Justin, I'm so glad that you asked that question, and I had that conversation with Leader McConnell the other day. It is a steadfast position in the United States Senate from the majority leader that liability reform protections are critical. I agree with that. Unfortunately, in the House right now, in which I serve in the minority, that is a minority position. But let me say this loud and clear. As we come out of this economic malaise caused through no fault of American entrepreneurs, this is a pandemic that hit us, it hurt us. We've got to make sure that we have liability protections, because if we don't do that, and the lawsuits have started to come, unfortunately, the folks who would benefit from that, sadly, will sue us into oblivion and hurt our chances of economic recovery and hurt very fragile American industries, from healthcare to long-term care. And we have got to make sure, in my view, that as part as any future package going forward, that smart liability reform is part and parcel of that, to protect the American entrepreneurs and American businesses. Without that, they will devour us with frivolous lawsuits, with lawsuits that will cost literally millions of dollars to defend at a time when American businesses and American insurers just do not have the resources to do that.
That's a great answer. And we hope certainly that that is the case. You know, the HEROES Act passed the House last week. It's a $3 trillion package. Obviously, the Senate is taking a much different approach to a next package. I think Senator McConnell noted that whatever package comes will have to have a price tag of less than $1 trillion or at $1 trillion. He sort of put a cap on it. What do you see, sort of, where's the middle ground on a potential deal here? And what do you think the realistic timeline is to get a phase 4 package done?
Another excellent question. Justin, in my speeches on the House floor, and I have addressed each and every one of these bills that have gone out, I voted for the first 4. I did not vote for last week's bill because it became literally, unfortunately, a very partisan bill that was loaded up with things that were just not really germane, unfortunately, to a lot of the coronavirus, not only on the healthcare side, but on the economic side. I really wish the speaker had not engaged in that type of a partisan bill. But in my speech on the floor, I talked about economic common ground, coming to do what we did in the last 2 bills, where we can coalesce as a country around common sense aid that needs to go out to states and to cities to help first responders, to help the American worker, to help affected businesses that have literally been devastated, not only healthcare, but hospitality and restaurants. Get to a point where, as we did in the first 4 bills, where we coalesced around economic common sense and common ground. And what did you see? Almost virtually unanimous consent. Republicans, Democrats, independents, members of the House, members of the Senate, and the administration voted for those 4 bills. This last bill, unfortunately, when we devolve, and I use that term devolve, into partisan bills with hyper-partisan values in there, what it's going to do, it is going to drive people away from those bills. That bill had no chance in the Senate. It had no chance with the White House. What we've got to do is get back to work and, I think, focus on the aid that the vast majority of the American people want to go out and makes economic common sense and avoids hyper-partisanship on both sides.
In that too, obviously, you know, 501c organizations, certain 501c organizations were left out of the Paycheck Protection Program initially. And I know, aside from being a chamber ourselves, but there are a lot of smaller chambers and smaller association groups that have been equally affected. What are the chances that that may change in a next package as well to get access to some of the paycheck protection funds as we look as a larger community of 501 organizations?
Justin, another excellent question. As you know, in the existing litigation, 501c3s and I think 19s were included. The other numerical denominations were excluded. The chance of getting that done depends on how the aid is directed. I am a big champion of chambers of commerce, particularly the Chattanooga area Chamber of Commerce, which has literally led North America and our community in a way in good times, and will help lead us in times that are not so good. I think you're critically important right now. The problem is some of the C6s, as you are designated, are other groups. And where I think the aid needs to go to Chamber of Commerce's and legitimate C6s, there are groups out there that are C6s that are set up as lobbying organizations that the American people might not want that aid to go to. So there's been some criticism. So maybe if it gets narrowed to perhaps Chamber of Commerce's and C6s and other groups, such as some of the co-ops that are out there that were designated by a numeral that was not covered. Again, if it makes sense, fine. If it goes to groups that are out there that are just designed for political gain, I think the American people would and should stand up and say no. One of the great things I think about chambers of commerce, while you advocate for legislation, you're advocating for everyone. You're advocating for education. You're advocating for commerce. You're advocating for workers. So I think that is a legitimate use, and I'd like to see that included. I think it's just going to have to be narrowly tapered to address that so that other groups that are a little bit more political and partisan don't get that aid.
Sure. Switching gears a little bit, obviously air travel has been heavily affected, and being in sort of a mid-market city, what is the outlook for air service in Chattanooga and region and cities like ours that are going to be affected in some way? What is your take on sort of the status of air travel and airports and specific to Chattanooga?
Thank you. I have spent quite a bit of time the last few weeks going back and forth to Washington, D.C. So our listeners know we have lost our direct flight to Washington, D.C. from Chattanooga. Let's hope that's temporary. Our friends in Knoxville, where they had at least 2 direct flights to Washington, have lost their direct flights. What does that mean? That means we have to travel through either Atlanta or Charlotte. As I've gone through those other hubs, I have seen in the last month a major increase in those airports. We are starting to see Chattanooga come back, which is a good thing. But I give the highest remarks to the Chattanooga airport. Over the last decade that I've served in Congress, I can see the tremendous amount of increase in travel. We were doing so well. The good news is I was able to work to procure with the Chattanooga airport a $5 million grant recently. So they are getting grants and they are doing very well. Obviously, we've got to get traffic back and interest back. So the aid package that we passed to help the airlines, and think about the airlines. I was sitting on a plane about a month ago. There were 3 people on an A320. I mean, it was just amazing. It was staggering. They have been hammered. Now, fortunately, I traveled last week to Washington. The plane was full, but the amount of flights have been restricted, understandably so. So we're going to have to see how this works. But I do think air traffic will come back. Fortunately, the Chattanooga airport has done a great job up until this time. And surely they've been affected, but we're going to see air traffic come back. And I look forward, and I'm going to urge the airlines to get these direct flights back. Think about it. We've opened up Chicago. We've opened up Dallas. We've opened up New York with direct flights, in addition to Washington, D.C. That's important to Chattanooga and Hamilton County, because as we want to continue to attract business, air traffic is one of those key indicators that that businesses and business people are going to look at. They want to be able to get in here with ease. I want to work with our airport and the airlines to get back to where we were.
I've got one more question for you, and then I'll kick it back over to Jeremy. Obviously, you know, cities and state funding governments have been hit pretty hard as well. I think Mayor Burke just released his budget with $8.6 million in cuts that they think in lost revenue. Obviously, the state's going to be dealing with, you know, a $300 to $500 million hole. What is out there for sort of cities under 500,000 that were sort of shut out of the first run, and state governments? Is there going to be sort of a way to help, not necessarily backfill, but have a little more flexibility in some of the funds that have been released? And then will there be some help for sort of mid-sized cities going forward?
Absolutely. The answer is yes. And for our listeners, in the legislation that was passed, cities, municipalities with populations of 500,000 or more were able to apply for direct aid. In a very parochial way, a local way, in our great state, that meant that Memphis and Nashville qualified. Every other municipality, including Chattanooga and Knoxville and Oak Ridge, some of our larger cities, Bradley County, up the road, Cleveland. I actually was an advocate to get more direct aid for the smaller cities. We were unsuccessful in getting that done. Having said that, the state of Tennessee in that first tranche of money got about $3 billion in aid. That is offset by the aid that Nashville and Memphis will get. But here's the good news. Governor Lee has assured our local leaders and done a good job working with our state leaders as well, that aid that they have now in hand, they actually have been given that money. They've got that, and they will be able to distribute that to the local cities and counties as needed. So they've got an arduous task, and I'm going to work with our state leaders and with our governor. We talk every week. We're going to talk today. As we get that, they've got that money. Where do they want to apportion that, and how do they want to give that out? But I do think there will be additional funds coming to the state. Use a very good term, flexibility. I want the utmost of flexibility given to our state leaders so that they can distribute that. And let me give kudos to Mayor Burke for agreeing not to look at a tax increase. I'm going to put my citizen hat now on, not my congressman hat on. I like to stay in my lane, but as a citizen and resident of Hamilton County, thank God we have not raised taxes. I know there was an attempt to do that back a while ago. There is no appetite to do that. I think right now we've got to be fiscally sound. And that means I'm going to have to step up and do my job and make sure that we get federal dollars, not only to our state, but to our local and county governments to fill the needed gaps. We had testing that was done at the local Baylor school. It went very well, that the county incurred costs for. But in these very difficult fiscal times, and our state is set up very well, in a good way. We have got to balance our state budget. That is going to be an arduous task, but our state leaders will do that. But to the extent possible, I want our listeners to know, any dollar I can get through the appropriation process, through the stimulus process, that we can get, if these dollars are out there by grant, by appropriation, or otherwise, I want to insist that our great state gets its fair share of money. I do not want us left out. And so far we have gotten that. That's going to be my job to make sure I fight for those dollars so that we can protect the local taxpayers and our state leaders as well. They've got a tough job. We need to work with them through this process.
Thank you, Congressman. We've had some questions come in from our viewers.
Sure.
I'd like to run through that if that's okay.
Absolutely.
There are considerable delays with foreign employee visa processing right now, and the express decision process has been suspended. With Chattanooga being such a large home to international businesses, do you have any information on when resources will be assigned back to handle the backlog?
It's a great question. I actually spoke with the folks who handle that on a national level. A couple of things have happened. First of all, they are, and we're going to help them at the federal level. About 97% of the revenue that these agencies use to process visas and allow people to come in are generated from fees. The fact that they are fee generated, their demand is down right now. So they've seen a precipitous loss in revenue. So they have come to us through the appropriations process, and I've agreed to help them to get the dollars necessary so that they can process more of these temporary workers and visas. But the key was that unlike most things where we would do an appropriation, these were agencies largely dependent overwhelmingly on fees being generated. When demand dropped through the coronavirus situation, their revenue dropped immediately. So we've got to address that, and we are.
Thank you. Could you tell us when the deadline is for small business owners in areas affected by last month's tornado to apply for SBA disaster relief assistance?
Let me give you two deadlines. First of all, they can continue to apply for tornado assistance, and I want to talk about that in a second. For PPP, if I may get that in, it's June the 23rd, June 23. Please get that in, because some businesses have told me, Chuck, I'm going to get, but I've been busy trying to work and survive, and I've told them, if you let June 23rd go by, you're going to be boxed out. Let me talk about FEMA. FEMA is one of those agencies that has not only been charged with the COVID situation nationally, it has to deal with local disasters like those tornadoes. I deal with Director Gaynor on a regular basis. In my role as the ranking member on the Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee, my subcommittee funds FEMA. My subcommittee funds TSA. My subcommittee funds the Coast Guard, funds ICE, CBP, Secret Service. That's our portfolio. So in funding FEMA, I deal with Director Gaynor on a regular basis. Let's give them kudos. When Mayor Coppinger reached out to me on the day of the tornadoes and said, we need PPP, that day, Gaynor got on the phone and got that relief right in. We worked with Governor Lee, the individual relief and the state relief in not only Hamilton County, but Polk and Bradley counties, which were hit very hard. So I would tell people, apply right away. There is time to do that. As far as a specific deadline for that, I don't have a set date yet. It is June the 23rd for tornado. He just told me, my staff just told me. So it is also June 23rd for tornado relief as well as PPP. So thank you for asking that. We've got that information. So if been affected by the tornadoes, June 23rd as well. And that aid is flowing. We also want to get aid. We talked about local governments. Hamilton County has to go and actually pick up these trees and the rubbish and dispose of that. That is a huge cost to Hamilton County. They will be fully 100% reimbursed. I just want to make sure it happens quickly. Our friends in Bradley County 10 years ago, when they got hit, almost had to wait a year for those funds. I got that for them, but I think in my position now, not only having more seniority in Congress, but also funding that subcommittee, that agency that does it, will be able to get that done in a much quicker fashion.
So as we see states begin to reopen, it seems like a big next part of this is going to be confidence. If we open things up, but people are afraid to go out, it doesn't do us a lot of good, right? So what do you see as the components that need to be in place to make people feel like they can safely go out and begin to travel, go to businesses, and things like that again?
Jeremy, another excellent question. I think we need to have a national campaign, elected leaders such as myself, going out and eating out on a regular basis. Just last night, I had friends of mine from Oak Ridge come down. We went to a local eatery. When we see people out being safe, being smart, and the local restaurateurs have done a very good job here in Hamilton County. I know many of your members, they're doing a good job, not only with social distancing, but you're right. We've got to get consumer confidence back. We've got to get people ready to go out and not only work again, but visit our eateries, travel. We want to get tourism back. Our great local aquarium, which is such a magnet and draws people in from literally all over the country to Chattanooga and Hamilton County, has suffered throughout this. This was a facility that, despite having to lay off people, have a lot of built-in costs just to care for the fish and the animals there. High upkeep, high maintenance. When they open up and when people start coming back with tourism, but we need to do what we do best in Hamilton County, lay out the welcome mat for the world. Our people are friendly in good times. We're going to come back and be friendly, open our doors, open our businesses. But I do think we need to get our leaders, our celebrities, getting consumers comfortable back, living the way that we used to, eating out more often, visiting, spending their dollars, and creating that economic vibrancy that we had in an unprecedented way before this. We will have that again. That will get our economy roaring back. Seeing Volkswagen coming back and work is encouraging. Our manufacturers are coming back. They're doing it in a smart way. And fortunately, we have some sectors, some retail sectors doing very well in retail, in food service and the like. I'm glad to see that. I want that to continue.
Okay, I think that covers most of what we had. Justin, did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
Good. Thanks again for joining us. It's always great to have you, and we appreciate all the time and the effort and the work you do on behalf of the entire community, Congressman. So again, we appreciate having you as a great partner. Your staff in Chattanooga does a great job as well. So thank you for all you're doing through all of this, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your kindness towards my staff. Steve Howell is here with me, my legislative director from Washington, D.C., Daniel Tidwell. We are working every day to try to help individuals, businesses. We're going to continue to do that. If I've got a message, is let's all work together. Let's be civil. Let's be friendly. Let's put our partisan differences aside. This is an American dilemma caused beyond our shores. We're dealing with it. We're going to come out of this. We're going to be stronger than ever. But the key is to work together, and we're all on the same team. And I thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Congressman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all.